Hello friends, welcome to Edwiki Learning channel. Please do subscribe to get more updates on the DevOps concepts. This video is part of the full course AWS DevOps Practitioner training. Please do check the description below to get the link for the complete full course. Without further delay, let's get into the video. Thank you.
Well, team, welcome back and let me get started with the today agenda, and we will be doing the improvements on our Python side, right, to make more best practices included in our program to you know to meet our same how to stop the EC2 instances, right? So that is a requirement, and we are keep on improving the stuff. As part of that, we are trying to include some of the Python concepts, correct? Because we are trying to learn the use case of each Python concept that we are going to include here, right? That's the goal. Well, so hope you are able to hear me and able to see my screen, and hope you are good now to get started with. Thank you. And so this is the Python program that is in the current state, right? That's what we have written to stop the EC2 servers. The overall the flow of this program is to stop the EC2 instances which are having the name tag as web server, correct? That is what is the requirement. Now let me slightly change the requirement, guys. Okay, for example, so this particular program is working, right? Is working if the tag, right? If I mean to say, if the name tag is web server, correct? You see here, I said it as web server. Let's say tomorrow your manager come and ask you that, hey, can you write a Python program which will be to stop all the servers whichever is having a app server tag, correct? Possible, right, guys? So your manager asks you that write a program which will be stopping all the servers whichever the servers are having the name tag as app server. Do you think the current program works? No, right? The current program will not work because in the current program, the comparison to your value to the web server, that is hard coded. You see here, the web server is actually hard coded here, right? But tomorrow my requirement may changes. Hey, please stop the servers whichever are having the app servers. Now, how do you make your program little more generic way so that it works for web server, it works for app server, or it works for any other? I mean to say, I will give the choice to the user who is running my program to enter, right, which value that he want the Python to be check against the name tag. Getting me, guys? The way how I'm doing little more improvements to my code, right? So that means this is the line number 10 is where I'm actually checking, right, if the tag is web server or not. Maybe as of now, this web server is actually hard coded, right? I don't want to hard code it. This particular value, let me make it as a variableized, correct? Right? So what I do is, right? So my thought process is, I'm just taking one more variable. So let's say input tag value. I'll say input tag value, correct? So the web server, correct? Let me take that value here. So actually the which value that I want the Python to be check, that value I took into a variable. Now I can use this variable in this section, correct? Help me guys in the chat window. Can I do this? Right? So rather giving the value as hard coded here in the comparison check, now I'm just making it into a variable, and this variable is already holding a value called web server. Good. I made little changes to this program. Even though the program will work only for web server, right? It will not work for app server. Tomorrow, when someone asks that, hey, can you run the program to stop the app servers? Now I need to come and do the changes here, right? Rather, let me give the choice to my users only. Here, what I do is, right, I'll say, let me use the input function and I'll ask the user only, hey, please enter tag value. I'm just putting some meaningful text inside that, okay? So I'm just using the input statement here. Now we'll see what will happen after executing this program, guys, okay? So if I see the PWD, I'm in the right place. Let me do Python space main.py. I'm executing this program, right? The web server is not hard coded. Rather, I just replaced with a input, okay? Now let me hit enter. I'm just executing this Python program. Now you see, guys, the Python is now actually asking you, hey, please enter the tag value that you wanted to do the check and stop the server, correct? This is where now the user can take a choice. If you give web server as input, the Python program will actually take that web server as a value and it will go and compare against the web server and the web servers will be get stopped. If you give the tag value as app server here, that will be taken care. Basically, whatever the input that you give here, that input will be captured, that will be given as a value to this variable. That way, I am just avoiding giving the input values as a hard coded. I'm asking my user itself to enter it dynamically at the time of the user is running. Are we good with this, guys? That way, I'm just making the program little more flexible to the users to uh, take a choice which servers that they wanted to stop, right? Good. So when you are doing this kind of exercises, right, maybe you don't know what is input statement. As usual, you take one simple test file, test.py, go there and see how it works, right? Or else we can do here as well. For example, I wanted to print this variable. I just wanted to verify, right, what is this, if I give some input, what will be there? Control C, I'll execute it one more time. Maybe giving a colon is more meaningful. Now let me try. I'm just executing the program one more time, guys. Okay, it is now asking. Now let me give the value as web server, hit enter. Now you see it is actually printing the value as web server, and you see this is the line number 7. That is where I'm printing my variable value, right? Just to give you the confirmation that whatever the input that you given, that is actually captured as a value to this variable, and it is actually printing the same web server. So whenever you are referencing the same variable in your condition, right, it is actually comparing against the web server and all the web servers will be get considered for a stop. Cool. That's one good thing. This is good actually, right? This is good actually, but let's say the requirement is a little more different, right? Your manager says that, hey, could you please uh, go and stop the app server as well as the web server? Do you think my current program works? Again, no, right? So your program will not work. Again, I need to run the program at least 2 times. The first time when you run the program, you give the web server as input. The second time when you run the program, probably you need to give the other one, right? Rather, can I do little more changes to this program in such a way that the users can give multiple values so that the it will take care of, right? So Let me do a simple change now, right? And again, I don't want this kind of a dynamic input behavior. So I just shown you this behavior as one of the requirement, how a users can supply the values at the time of running the program. But most of the times, right, I don't want this type of the dynamic input behavior, because at the end of the day, once my program is finalized, my requirement is I want this program to be executed automatically at every Friday and every Monday to stop it and to start it, something like that, right? So when you are expecting the program to be executed automatically, if your program is expecting the input from the user in a dynamic runtime, who will supply the value, correct? So if you have really a requirement where the users are executing the program, you go with a input statement. That's what I wanted to show you. The second thing, if I wanted to give the app server as well as the web server, let's say, then this program will not work, right? So, so the best thing that I do is, maybe I'll create one simple file here. Maybe I'll say tags.txt, right? I'll just simply I'll create one file. Now I'll ask my users, whoever wanted to run my program, I'll ask my users that, hey, if you wanted to run this program with your list of values, you specify your values in this file, correct? You see like this, right? So now if this is the case, the users can put any number of values that they wanted to in this file. Make sense, guys? Then tomorrow when you give this program to anyone, right, if they wanted to stop some 10 different tag values, no problem, you mention all the 10 different tag values in tags.txt file, and do little changes to your Python program in such a way that your program is actually reading the values from the file. Are we good with this? So I'm just avoiding the users are doing some changes to my code. I don't want the user is touching my code to do some changes. That's the requirement, right? As a good developer, right, as much as possible, try to minimize the changes in the code when you are offering this solution to some other customers. When you give this code to someone, hey, take this code and execute it, they should not do any changes to the code. If any needed, you just supply a specific file like this. Hey, if you wanted to change your values, you change the values in a file. My program is intelligent enough to take the or read the values from the file and process it. Good. So then whenever you have some values in a specific file, how your program will read this file, how to take that data and process it, correct? Now we need to understand how to read a file, right? So let's say this is the, okay. So open is the built-in function which will be used to read a file. Open and specify the file name. Let's say tags.txt is my file name, comma, and I wanted to open this file in a read-only fashion. The files can be open for reading purpose. The files can be open for writing purpose. The files can be open to modify some content, correct, guys? When you open a file in VA editor in general, you may open it for reading the data or to modify the data or to override the data, whatever the reason, right? So when you're using the open function, the built-in function, you need to specify you are opening the file for which purpose. And in this case, I wanted to open this file to read the data inside. And when you are opening this file, the corresponding output, correct? When the file is opened, the result will come, right? You capture the result it into another variable. Let's say file data. Any variable is fine. The left side here, I'm just taking file data as a variable. It could be anything, right? So this particular line number 6 will ensure that it is opening the file, it is actually capturing the content of the file that will be given to this particular variable for now. Now I'm curious to know, right, what will be the data in this file underscore data, correct? How do you get that? Print. I wanted to print the file underscore data, correct guys? Once you know the data is read in which format into this variable, then you will know what will be your next steps in order to transform that data into your own required format, correct? That is the reason now I wanted to see the data that is came into this variable. That's the reason I'm actually using the print statement here, right? So some time back, I actually wrote a code in order to see or in order to show you how to give the input function to ask the user to supply the input. Now I don't want it, right? So probably these two lines I will be removing because I'm not going in that approach where the users are entering the values during that runtime, right? The values are available in a file. So let me remove that. Now let me execute this program just to see, right, what will be, right, just to see what will be the value over there. Okay, so now I'm getting the error, guys. Okay, so if you see the error, it says that, of course, I'm getting the print statement here. Let me come down. The line number 7 is executed properly. Okay, the line number 7 is actually printing the first line. Okay, after that it is giving the error. So can someone tell me why I'm getting the error like this? Trace back, something like this. You see here, somewhere in the program I said a variable. Now I deleted that variable, right? And now it is complaining that this variable is not exist, right? And that's the reason you got that error. For now, temporary to move forward, let me give the value as hard coded again, or else it is keep on giving the complaint that the variable is not exist because I removed the variable because I'm changing my approach. Now you see the first line, this is the output of the line number 6 actually, sorry, line number 7. So it is actually opening the file, it is reading the content, and that content is kept into a file underscore data variable, and I'm printing that. Interestingly, right, the output of this variable is not a actual one that what you see, correct? The file has a data called web server and app server, but when you are reading the file and when you are trying to print that value, you are getting something else. So when you are using the open built-in method in order to read a file, you will not get the human readable plain text format directly. You will be getting that it into a variable in a different format. Technically speaking, it is in a object format. So in order to get the actual data on this variable, you need to pass one more function called read. So on this variable, I'm just passing one more variable called read. Now let me see what will be the output of this. Now you see that I'm getting my actual data. You see web server and app server. Now I'm interested to see the data that I'm reading is in which format, correct? So what I do is in this print statement, let me do type function, correct? I wanted to see the data that I'm reading is in which format. you see that the data is actually in the string format, right? Now we need to see how to do a data parsing of this string data and convert it into your own required format and give it to your next level of programs. Now, whenever you are reading the data, you can read the data using read statement, or you can read the data using, sorry, readline statement as well. Readline is also one of the function that will be reading a line. Let me see what will be the output of this statement when you use readline. Sorry, I don't want the type now. I wanted to print the actual value, right? Sometime back, I tried getting the data using a read function. Now I'm trying to get the data using a readline. What is the difference, guys? The read function was giving the complete data, right? The read line is giving only one line of data, correct? You see, you are getting only one line in your file. If you go for read lines, okay, if you go for read lines, that will give you all the data, but in a line by line fashion. That is the different ways how you can read a file. Based on the file content is in which format, maybe you need to take a choice. You wanted to go with the read or read line or read lines, which makes more comfortable. You can go with that. Now you see that in this case, I'm getting the data in the list format. Why? I said read lines. Each line is taken it into one element. I have got 2 lines of data in my file. So it is giving you the data in the list format like this. What is this \n? That is actually a new line. Here, if you see the web server, after that the new line is started, right? That new line is actually captured and it is showing you as a \n there. Now it's up to you how you wanted to convert this data into your own required format. What is our next step, guys? I think out of these 3 different ways to read the file, read line, read lines, which makes more comfortable or more easy to manage the data at this use case? Probably I feel read lines is more comfortable because I got the data in a list format. Each element is actually holding at least one line of data. It's more easy to consume the data. Good, I'll go with this. Now what I do is whenever you are reading the data and the data is in the list format, how do you process this list data, guys? Because my requirement is I need to get the first element, then I need to get my second element. That is my requirement, right? Obviously for loop, correct? Of course it is through indexing, but we don't want to specify the index manually, right? When you loop through in a for loop, it will take care of the first iteration. It will give you the first element. The second iteration, it will give you the second element. Good, right? Every time when I'm working on this program, you see that the instance is now stopped or already stopped. It is keep on printing, guys. How to avoid those? Because when I'm working on this line number 6 and 7, I'm trying to figure out some logic, right? To improvise my code. But the entire code is keep on executing, and it is executing the whole bunch of lines, and wherever the print is there, it is actually printing. Is it annoying, guys? Yes or no? This is annoying, right? Because during the development, you are trying to see what will be the response at one liner, but your Python program is executing whole bunch of lines and it is giving all other print statements as well. No worries, I'll fix that as well. But for now, let it be this buggy thing, right? So here what I do is I'll try to put a for loop for, let's say, tag in, specify this variable. Good. Of course, if you want, you capture this data it into another variable, then you specify the variable there. Either way it works. Now let's see what will be the data, guys. Always I need to use the print in order to see what will be the data. Now I'm actually giving this list it into a for loop, and each iteration it is going to get a first element it into a tag variable. The second iteration it is going to get the second element it into a tag variable. I'm just trying to see how I'm getting the data it into my variable. Interesting. Actually, the for loop is printing the web server, the first iteration. Good. Then I'm getting the second element app server. Good. But in between I'm getting some space also. Any clue, guys, why I'm getting the space here? Because of the new line, correct? There is a slash n and all, the new line, right? It is actually trying to give you some empty space. At least good for now, right? At least I'm able to get the first element, then the empty space, then the other element. So far so good, right? So what I do is in this tag, whatever the value that I'm capturing here, right? For this, let me apply a strip function. Remember, I already talked about this strip in basics. It will be removing some empty spaces for you, correct? If you are really not sure what it is, strip and all, always the same thing. First, you see the type of the variable that you are getting in, correct? So let's say whenever the for loop is getting the element, what is the type of the data that I am receiving? The type is string, and now we know that okay, the string type may have the strip function, correct? So then you should understand that I need to apply the strip function. Now let me see the behavior of my Python program. I can see that now the empty space got removed and I'm getting the first value and the second value. Looks good. Now probably this I'm going to assign to a variable. Maybe I'll say tag value. Okay. The value that I'm capturing, right? That value I'm getting it into a variable. Now the variable is tag value, correct? Now this is the tag value that I need to compare, correct, guys? The first time my for loop is iterated, it is going to get the web server. The second time my for loop is getting iterated, it is going to get the app server, correct? So this is the tag value that I need to compare. So this tag value I'm going to replace in this hard-coded web server section. Does that make sense? Now, when my for loop is iterating to get the first line of my file data, second line of my file data, all those things, definitely the whole program, and you see this entire program, right? This entire program now should be under the for loop, correct? I'm trying to make the indentation accordingly. I'm shifting this for loop, right? The previously written for loop under my new for loop. You see, this is the new for loop that I introduced this now. Now I'm making my whole program under this for loop. Now what will happen? When this for loop is iterated the first time, it is going to get the web server. Then that web server value will be processed by going through this whole bunch of code, and it will make the list of instance IDs. Correct? Then again the loop will be repeated. The second time it is going to get the second value, then again this whole bunch of code will be processed. That way, right? Like that. If the user has given a bunch of values here, all those values will be processed. Now, let me execute this program. Let's see if that is working as expected, guys. Okay. So I'm giving web server and app server. Let me see in reality, I have servers having what tags. Everything is web server, not good, right? Maybe one server, I'll make it as app server. Right? So one server is app server, two servers are web server. Now let's see what will be the behavior of my Python program here. It is actually processing all the three servers. Okay. Why it is actually processing all the three servers? It has to process. Okay, that's true. That's cool, right? Because I given the web server and the app server both. Maybe the two servers are web server, one is app server. Maybe it is processing everything. Maybe just to test the code how it is working, let me remove the app server. Let me keep only one web server, right? Now I should expect it is actually processing only two instances. Let's see. Okay, looks is good. It's running fine. The server ending with the 2A, the server ending with the 39. 2A, 39, these two are the web servers. The app server is not considered. Let me go there and let me make it as app server just to verify my code is working as expected. Now it is considering only one server ending with the C8. Ending with the C8 is actually app server. Looks good. As long as the code is working fine, we are good. Now let me go down. Yeah, that looks good, right? This is cool. We made some changes. I think this use case is completed now, right? How to read the file and how to process the file. This is good. Now let me do something like this. I'm just trying to come up with one more use case, guys. Okay, let me do some more changes, right? Um, Here I'm introducing one print statement saying that because I wanted to let my user know that what's happening, right? When the program is running. So I'll say that currently it's processing tag value, and let me specify the tag value, right? The tag value is format function tag underscore value. Okay, so let me see this again. So what is that I made here, guys? Actually added one other print statement. This statement is just for the information. We know that, okay, the Python code is actually processing the app server at this time, correct? So that the user will be happy to see this message, okay, this is doing the app server. After some time, let's say it will print that it is processing the web server. After some time, the one more. Usually when you have some 50 values there, you are interested to know, right? Currently the code is working on which level, how many are done, how many are left over, probably, right? So it's sometimes more convenient or more good practice to print this type of the informational messages, correct? Can I call or can I treat this particular message as an informational message, guys? Correct, no? When I say a informational message is mean that that message is just for the user uh, purpose. There is no error in my code. There is no problem in my code. It is just telling you that, hey, this is what is currently going on. This is called as an informational message. The problem is sometimes when you are using this type of the informational messages, this is good in terms of doing the development. During the development, you know at which line the code is executing, what's happening. When you finalize the code, once you put this code it into a real environment where it is running for your business, then I don't want these informational messages, correct? Mostly. Let's say you give this to customer and it is running automatically every Friday and every Monday, as an example. You are not running manually, right? This is running automatically every Friday. In that cases, do you really worry about these informational messages? No. I just need final output, right? Hey, once the complete code is executed, just tell me what is the status. I don't need to know how the line by line is being executed. The line by line, you need to know when you are doing the development time, but not later time once the code is composed. Hence the reason the print is not really that much powerful to manage all those things, because I can't go and comment that print statement each time when you don't want the informational messages. So I'm going to replace this print statements with one more beautiful Python logging concept using the logger module or logging module. So maybe I have shown you the Boto3 module, right? Now I'm showing you one more module which is called as a logging module. Same thing. How you go to the Boto3 module, follow the Boto3 documentation and compose the code. Similarly, now you need to get into the logging module, right? All the Python modules that you get it will be available in the Python documentation, right? You need to get into the Python module documentation here and it will tell you or it will give you all the Python uh, I think so this is where you can search for the different Python modules that we can import and can start with, guys, and you can see them in alphabetical order here. Okay, all these modules are the Python modules. Like Boto3 you don't see here because the Boto3 is something which is offered by the AWS people, right? The Python modules are available here. Let's say if I go to L and you see here logging is the module that is available, which is helping you to log the application. So tomorrow when you are using the Python for a specific purpose for use case, you need to come to this module documentation and search for the module, which module may help for your use case. I'll show you how this logging is helping me. Now I'll go to the logging module. I'll read this entire documentation to see how this logging module works and what is the syntax and the examples, all these. Then I'll try to implement it. For now, let me show you this. So I need to import this module and I need to get started with this, right? So in my code, now let me do, hey, I wanted to import a logging module. You don't need to install this module because this is offered by the Python itself by default. Okay. Now, whenever you are running the Python, sorry, print statement, rather print statement, you can say logging dot and specify what kind of the message it is. Let's say this is the informational message, and keep that it into a info block. Logging dot, and this is the informational message, and you put your message inside that box. Good. Now let me try to run the program to see what is the behavior. So let me remove that variables for now. Yeah, that's okay. So it should be a lowercase, it seems. Okay, let me try this, guys. So this should be a lowercase, it seems. Let me try this. Okay, good. Now I'm not getting any error. So this should be a lowercase. But interestingly, right, you see now I'm telling that, hey, this is the informational message, please print it. But it is not printing, right? Why it is not printing? The Python is assuming that, hey, this is the informational message. Why I need to print it every time? If this is a error, or if it is a warning or something very critical that user must know, then only it will be printing by default, or else no. That means the messages that you are going to print will have a different priorities, right? So the logging module has a messages which are info, which are which are debug messages, which are info, which are warning, which are error, which are critical. These are the different type of messages. The debug will give you more detailed information. Info will give you very little information. Warning will give you whenever there is some syntax related warnings or some issues are there. Error, that is where your Python program is failed. Critical, again the Python program is failed, but it's very critical for your program, right? So that's how you need to decide your message is belonging it into which priority out of this. By default, now tell me guys, are you really worried about the info and the debug? No, most of the times, right? You will be only worry about the warning messages, errors, and the critical. So the logging module will print only the messages which starts with warning only. The above two levels will not be printed by default. Let's say that means now you have written a code to print a informational message here, right? Maybe I'll use this here as well. Rather print, let's say this is the logging dot info. Yeah, so this is also a informational message. Now if I execute the code, the program is executing but it is not printing anything. This is fine, guys. Where it is getting here, right? There is one more print statement. Let me make it as logging.info. Now let me try to, I just have replaced all my print functions with the logging.info statement. Now you see it is not printing anything. Whenever, right, whenever you are working on this code to do some other changes, now you must know how the code is being executed. You wanted to print all these informational messages. You don't need to touch the code at all. What you do is go and inform to your logging module that, hey, logging module, and I'm setting a basic configuration, right? And the level, right? I want the logging.info. That means this is the one single place where you can tell that what kind of the messages that the logging module can print. Here, if you say, hey, please print the info, then it will start printing from info onwards. If you say, hey, print it from warning, then it will start printing only from warning level. You got me? That's how you can control what kind of the or which priority messages that you are trying to print in your program. Not all the messages all the times. Getting me, guys? So sometime back the info was not printing, right? Because the Python is treating that the info is not that much important to print. But if you say, hey, please print the informational messages for me, then you try to execute the Python program here. Now you see that it is actually printing the informational messages as well. When it is printing the informational messages, the format will be like this: info colon, this is your root module, that is uh, it is printing from which program. By default it will be a root module, that's fine. And your actual message, you see, these are the actual messages, right? Tomorrow, let's say you don't want any of the informational messages. What you do, just change this to, let's say, please print a error. So now you execute the code, the info will not be get printed. Wherever you might have been written the log statement as error, only that lines will be printed. For example, I'll make one here. Maybe I'll just add one more just to understand what is this error or informational. Here I'm putting one more statement, that this statement, let's say warning. You know, right? In which line you may get a warning message, in which line you may get a informational message. Based on that, it will just print it. You need to tell the message is a warning or the message is a info, message is a error. You need to tell, right? Let's say this message is a warning message, right? And instance is adding to the list. I'm just putting some line here. Now here, if you say info, hey, please print the messages, from info level, execute the code. The server is already stopped. Let me bring up the server's case, or else my code block is not executing, right? Okay, now the servers are good. Let me execute the code again. Now this is what I wanted to show you. Whenever you set the level as info, it is actually printing the informational, plus it is actually printing the warning messages as well, because I given you this hierarchy, right? If you say, hey, print the info, from info onwards, it will print all these type of messages, right? Let's say in your Python program, here you say that, hey, please print the messages from warning only. Then it will not print the informational messages. It will only print the warning messages wherever it will be identifying. That way you have the control to manage what kind of the messages that you wanted to print by using one single liner changes rather going and commenting the print statement everywhere. Getting me, guys? You see here somewhere I commented the print statement because some time back I did not work through this logging statement, right? If we have the logging statement enabled, so we don't need to edit the code every time. Just manage it in one liner, what kind of the messages that you wanted to print. Are we good with this? So this is one simple concept how to use the logging, but if you go deeper and deeper, there are many better practices are there how to use the logging statement. We need to read this documentation to understand how to use this logging method, sorry, uh, module, and the different ways how you can use this logging statement, all these things. It has very big thing, right? Since I know some of the syntax I have shown you, but you see here basic config. You see the basic config that I have used here, that is already documented and explained how to use it. The same syntax I just have referenced here as well. In the logging, I wanted to use basic syntax and specify the levels. So we need to read the documentation and understand it. It is even telling you that we can use the format as well. How we are expecting the log to be, formatted. Maybe I can use it. I just copy paste this syntax. We need to spend some time to understand the documentation. So it is saying that I can put a format as well. So the format says that, hey, you please print the time first, at what time this error is or information is printed, then the actual message. That's how we can even make some changes as well. Let me say print the info messages. You see, guys, now the change. It is printing the timestamp when this message is printed and your actual message. That's how it will help you sometimes when this error is occurred. Getting me? Or error or informational message or whatever it is. That's what is about logging module. Now let me do one other use case, guys. Are we good with this so far? I'm keep on doing some improvements here, but I wanted to have some use case for that. I don't, right? Yeah. Let me do some other changes now. Let's say when I am writing my Python program, right? You see, it's almost 31 lines now. Let's say now I wanted to do some other changes in this particular section. You do one change and you execute the code, this entire Python program is being executed, right? I don't want that to happen. Maybe I wanted to see what will be the data in this variable, why my entire program should run, correct? That's the reason, as much as possible, try to keep your entire program it into a functions only. Don't keep any data, sorry, don't keep any code outside of the function. That's the best practice. Here you see the stop logic is inside a function. This is good. But if you see the other code, guys, all other code that you see, this is not inside a function, right? So if you are keeping the code inside a function, then you can control this function can be executed or not by calling the function. If you don't call the function, that code will not be executed, correct? Let's say if I comment this line, do you think this whole bunch of code start from line number 22 to line number 30 will be executed? No, right? This entire code will be skipped. It's very easy to manage the code if it is inside a function. Though sometimes you are not reusing the code again and again, but still, if it is part of the function, right, you can easily control that when you want it to execute, when you don't want all this. But I cannot control that for the above code, that what is there, because this is not inside a function. Every time it will be get executed, right? So try to split your code it into multiple pieces and make them it into a multiple functions. Most likely each use case you keep it, you keep it in a specific function, right? Let me split my program it into multiple functions now. Already one function is there here to stop the servers, and here I wanted to break this entire stuff it into functions. Okay, so what I'm thinking is probably start from this. I mean to say, getting the EC2 instances and you know, yeah, getting the EC2 instances and comparing that with your tags and adding it into the list. I'm making this entire program it into one particular function. It's up to you how you wanted to break down, and quickly I can do something. Right? This program I wanted to put it into another function. This program. I don't want this program to be a part of my above for loop. I'm doing the changes, guys. This program I wanted to keep it in the a different function. Okay, what I can do, I'll say def, maybe the function name, I'll say this is what, this is generate instance list, correct? This function is doing what, guys? So this bunch of code is doing what? This is actually preparing your instance IDs that has to be stopped, correct? At the end of the day, it is actually appending the servers it into one variable, correct? That's the reason I'm making this name as generate instance list. That is the function. Inside the function, now you put your entire code block. I'm done. This is the second function. When this particular function has to be called, that is has actually I taken out this entire program for my above for loop, right? Technically, when the for loop is first iterated, this bunch of code has to be executed. When the for loop is second time iterated, this bunch of code has to be iterated, correct? That's how it was before. Now I split it into a different function. Maybe in the above for loop, I will be calling this function. Make sense, guys? And whichever the value that I wanted to give, I'll give this value as a argument and collect that value as a argument or as a value. Is it works? Now you see, when this loop is iterated, right? When this loop is iterated, the first time it is going to get the first value. That first value will be given to this function. It will collect that value. It will process it. Then this loop will be a second time iterated. It will get the second value. It will call the function. It will give the value and it will collect the value and it will process this value and it will add that it into your instance ID. Will it work, guys? Same thing. I'm just splitting it into multiple functions. No other reason. Even this particular for loop as well, right? Let me put it into a function. Maybe I'll say this is uh, basically read file, correct? This is actually reading the file, correct? You put some name for your function and inside that you put your Python program. right? This is the read file. So this function will be reading the file and it is executing this bunch of code. This inside this function, it is calling the another function. It is passing these values and this function is executed. This function will prepare your instance IDs. Then this function will take care of stopping the servers. Just moving it into different functions. Uh, I think this also, right? This is part of the here. Good. Most likely the variables can be outside of the function, but the actual core program, right? So better you keep it inside a function, guys. Good. Now let me execute my program. I don't want this info messages, so I can change this now. Show only for errors. Don't show for informational messages. Now you see guys, I'm not getting anything here. First thing, if you look at this file, okay, I'm calling my stop function. Good. It is calling the stop function and it is sending the instance ID value. Instance ID is actually a empty list, right? This function is not being executed at all. I mean to say this entire two functions are not executed because I did not call them. That's how it works. So we don't need to comment the lines when you don't want it to be executed. So because those will never be executed until unless you call them. Now what you do is here I'm going to call them. Which function that I need to call first, guys? This is the one, right? Read file. What I do is first I will be calling the read file that will take care of reading the file content. This function is taking care of calling the other function automatically. So you don't need to call this function by yourself, correct? I'm just calling only two functions here. The first function, the second function. This function will in turn will take care of calling the other dependency function because I have included here. So it will be taken care of. So now you see here. Let me try to run the program. Of course, you will not get any output here because I said info messages should not be printed, right? So you will not get any message saying that instance is stopped or whatever because I said don't print these messages. So I'm not getting any error, but that's fine. Maybe if you wanted to know that it is really working, just enable the info messages and just print it. Right? So it's actually processing the app server and it is already stopped. That is fine because the server is already stopped some time back. Sounds good, guys. Is it more, I would say, productive now, right? This is fine when it is showing the found credentials and all. It is just telling that basically the Python is reading the access key, secret access key from the .aws folder where you configure the AWS configure command and all, right? So since you enable the informational messages, it is actually showing that message as well is one of the information. Though you are not calling as part of your program, so that is actually printing that statement. That's fine. Because that is actually doing behind the screen to get the messages. Sorry, access key, secret access key. Okay, that's how I have three functions at this time. Now what I do is I'm just doing the changes here, guys. Here I have the instance ID is equal to and the empty list. You know the reason, right? Why I took the empty list. I took one empty list. Later on, I appended the values to that list. That's how my list will be filled with all the instance IDs which I wanted to stop, correct? Can I give this variable any way that I want to? Let's say here I'm removing this variable here. Can I give this variable inside this function itself? Let's say this is the function which is generating the list. And here I'm actually telling that, hey, take this variable which is the empty list and please append it. Let me try to see if my Python program works. So the line number 36 is actually complaining that, hey, this particular variable is not found. Whereas line number 36, this is the line number 36. So to the stop function, you are actually giving the instance IDs variable and it is complaining now, right? It is complaining that, hey, this particular, this particular function is not, sorry, this particular variable is not there. Why it is telling that the variable is not there? You given the variable, right? You given the variable here. But the problem is you given a variable inside a function. That variable is valid, is readable, accessible only within the program that is inside the same function. It won't be available for other functions or outside of the function, right? So this variable is called as a local variable which is available only in this function. This variable is actually appended by the actual values, that is true, but that is not available for outside of the function. So obviously it is not able to. That is called as a local variable. Some time back it was working because that is outside of the function, which was a global variable and able to access anywhere in the program. Anywhere in the program. The variable that is outside of the function can access by anyone or any function as well. But if you declare it within the function, no, that will not be available by outside of the people. That's why it is complaining. Now what makes more meaningful, guys? You wanted to keep this variable as a global or a local? What is your take on now? Of course, based on the use case, based on the thought process, based on the developer strategy, right? Nothing is right, nothing is wrong basically when it comes to the programming. As long as you are getting the output, that is good. How good that you are writing the program, it's up to the individual's capability. That's what I can say. Sometimes you make it as a global, sometimes you make it as a local. It's up to your thought process, what makes more sense for you. What I do now is just to call out some other concepts. I wanted to keep this instance IDs within a function as a local variable only. Okay. Now in this function, after this whole program is executed, correct? Once this entire for loop is completed, okay? Once this entire for loop is completed, so this is actually calling by this guy, right? Yeah. So this is actually calling by this guy, and this is this function. Looks good, right? So this function is being called by this guy, right? This for loop. So once this for loop is completed, right? Once this for loop is completed, give me a second. Yeah, that's okay. maybe this is not the right use case to talk about this. Okay, let me do a small change now. Okay, so what I do is I'm putting this variable inside this function, and let me do this. I'm actually not doing the append operation here. I'm doing the change, guys. Okay, so not to make you guys confused, just to tell about the different way how we can handle the same situation. Okay, technically speaking, right? Technically speaking, who supposed to append a variable, guys? Who supposed to append your instance IDs in this scenario? Finally, who is getting the value? Give me a second. I'm just trying to make a change. Okay, no other reason. Well, definitely I don't want to use this liner here. I'm not appending anything here. Okay, I'm not appending anything here. So the instance ID I wanted to return. So this is the instance ID, right? So what I do is I'm not appending it into the list. Rather I'm going to return. Okay, RUTURN. Done. What I'm doing is when someone is calling this function, okay, by giving the tag value, right? When someone is calling this function by giving the tag value, okay, it will take the tag value, it will get the EC2 servers, right? It will compare the tag value. If the tag is good, okay, then let me see if the instance is already stopped. If it is already stopped, nothing, right? But if it is not already stopped, then it is going to execute the else block. Sometime back I was able to append, but now what I'm doing, I'm actually returning some values, right? That means this value is going to send it back to the caller in the sense who called this program, who called this function. For that caller, it is going to return a value, and this value will be returned. What is this value? This is the instance ID that it has to, it's supposed to, you know, stop the server, right? Rather appending, I'm just returning this value. So I'm just removing this particular variable as well here, right? I'm just returning this value. This value I'm capturing in my caller. You see here, this is where I call the function, right? When I'm calling the function by giving this tag value, if any values that are being returned after some execution, that returned value I'm capturing it into another variable. So the first time when the for loop is iterated, it is going to get one value as a return value. The second time the for loop is iterated, again it is calling the function, get some value returned, and it will take it here. The third time it is iterated, again it get one more other value, and it will be, capturing the value. Got me? So finally I'm actually capturing my instance IDs here, which is returned by this function, and my function is not actually appending here itself, right? It is actually returning, and I'm capturing here, and this is where I'm trying to do the append operation, right? You see, I took care of this list, and I said that instance IDs dot append. Hey, now you please append the instance ID that you received. Make sense? Hope this works. Dynamically, I'm applying my thought process, guys, just to change the stuff. Now it is actually appending this instance IDs. Okay. Now, who is calling this read file? The read file is calling by this guy, right? Here. And inside the read file, I have the instance IDs, which is a local variable, right? This variable is not available outside of the function here. What I do now is in the read file, again, I'm actually doing a return. Hey, please return this instance IDs. So what's happening now? It is actually calling this get instance list function, and that instance ID captured it into a variable that is appended. Again, the loop is repeated. It is going to get the second ID, get that into a variable, append it, prepare your instance ID finally, and once this read file is completed, it is going to return this whole bunch of list of instance IDs to my caller here. And since the read file is actually returning something, you need to collect it into another variable here. Maybe I'll say get list. You are getting some list, right? Get instance IDs list. So you collect the value which is returning by this particular function. Whatever you collected here, you give that as a input to this function. Make sense, guys? So at end of the day, these are the two lines that you are executing, correct? These two lines will take care of running the read file function. The read file function will take care of running the generate instance list function. The generate instance list function will take care of doing the whole business logic and return a instance ID that it has to stop, and it will collect that value, it will append it, and finally once this whole loop is completed, right, then your function will be completed, then it is actually returning the value as well. Will it work? Let me try. But for now, right, maybe I made a lot of changes to this program, right? So maybe rather calling it as a read file, I'll say get list. I'm just changing my Python function names, which is more meaningful now. The first function is going to give you the list. Right? This is some variable and pass it here. Okay. So the first function is now get list. It is going to read the file and prepare the list of the servers. And this is get instance, because this is actually giving you one instance at a time, right? I'll make it as get instance. Now here also I'll do the change. It should be good now. Return instance IDs syntax in this get list function, I just renamed it, right? This is the function, right? This function is returning a value to whom? It is returning to the caller. Who is calling? This one is calling, right? The line number 39 is calling, right? You see this function name. The line number 39 is calling this function, right? So The line number 39 is calling the function. So once this function is completed, once this function is executed completely, finally the output will be returning to the caller. That output is captured here, which is the list of your EC2 instance IDs that I'm using as an input, and I'll be calling another function. It is not returning to a file. It just read the file and it is returning to the caller to the function of the function. What's happening now? Okay, so finally I have declared some modules here. So maybe to make more readability, I'll say these are the modules, correct? Right? Then once you import the modules, this is initialize clients, correct? I'm actually getting uh, the Boto3 client, and I'm just configuring my module. Maybe I'll say configure modules. After that, you are actually, trying to, this is also part of the same thing. Why this line is here, guys? Okay, this is the global, right? That's the reason. Let me take this out into here. Yeah, that makes sense. Is it cleaner now? So now these are the functions, correct? That's it. I have just 3 sections. Import the modules, configure your modules, right? I mean to say get the relevant module specific clients configuration, then declare your functions. One function to get the list, one function to get the specific server, one function to stop the uh, servers. There are 3 functions. Now tell me guys, when you execute this code, which line will be executed first? Of course, just forget about these things. These are the initialization. So can I say this one, the 41 line? So it is going to invoke the 41 line that will kick off your project. It will go and read the or execute the get list. It is going to execute the get instance, right? Once that is done, the 42 line. What I do is these two I'm going to put into another function. Sorry, these 2 lines I'm putting it into another function. My function name is main. Okay, now I'll keep it inside that. Now what I do is I'll call the main function. That's it. Now tell me guys what I did. A one liner, correct? If I execute the main function, will it take care of whole project? Yes. That is how I am making more changes to my code, and finally this is the state. How many of you expecting a few more best practices on this code, guys? Or it is okay? A lot of things, right? Yeah, that's how it is. Sometimes Python is interesting. Sometimes it is, when we get output, it will be interesting. When you get an error, it is frustrating. Yeah. Well, guys, so I think this is good enough. So like you see here, like I'm just calling the main function. The main function will take care of calling the get list. Then it will call the stop function. So finally, a whole bunch of code will be get executed. That's how you need to make some best practices. Finally, let me run this code. Let me see if that works. Okay, I'm getting some errors. Maybe because of we made a lot of changes there. So instance is already stopped, then I'm getting the error. Okay, this one. That's okay. So we'll look into that. There's just some syntax issues. Some it is not able to, it is not able to process it. I think this is good to get this error, guys. Okay. Now let's say I got this error. How many of you frustrated with this error? Because when you look into this error, it's not a human readable format, right? We can't understand it. Okay, what it is trace back, it is saying module, and again this, correct? Lot of bunch of text here, correct? Sometimes the Python errors are not more user friendly to read it and understand it in one liner, right? But do you have any syntax errors in your code? Help me, guys. Take some boosting. No, right? Usually the Python will have two type of. One is syntax issue, one is the runtime exception. Syntax issue in the sense maybe you forgot one, closing bracket, or you forgot one, semicolon. That is a syntax issue. Look like here there is no syntax issue, but there is an issue when it is processing the data. Sometimes you given the a string data, you are expecting to act it as a integer value, and it will not work, right? That's a formatting issue. So when you get this kind of the exceptions, right? I don't want my Python is complaining in this fashion. I need to have some reasonable meaning, no, information message has to be printed. So to handle these type of exceptions, try to keep all of your business logic inside the try block. You see now, here I'm putting a try block, and this entire program I'll move it inside a try block. I'm moving my entire program inside the try block. Now I'll add it a except block. Except exception as error. That means, hey, when someone is calling this function, please try to execute this code whichever is there in the try block. If for any reason, if this try block is showing any exception during the runtime, then please execute this except block. That is how it works. If your try block is working as expected without any issues, then your except block will not be executed. This is not like a if else block. No, this is the try excepts. The except block will execute only if there is an issue with running the try block, right? Then you call this except block. Now you say logging dot error. Now tell me, guys, for any reason, if the except block is executed, after that inside this block, is this will be a informational message? No, right? No, right? Anything that is being executed inside the except block, will that be a informational message? No, right? Why? If my except block is being executed, is mean that your try block is failed. When the try block is failed, is mean that your code is not working as expected. Is that make sense? That's the reason inside the except block I'm putting the logging dot error. I wanted to print a error here. So whatever the exception that is collected here when something is went wrong, you collect that exception as a error variable and you print the error variable. So that is what it is. I'm using the logging dot error here because this will be a actual error, right? This is the actual error. This line will execute only when your try block is failing. So let me apply this same logic everywhere. This is the try block. This is the except block. And let me print the error, right? Here also. This is the try block. If the try block has any issue, then you print the error. Almost done. Now let me execute the code. That's okay. It has multiple exceptions, guys, so my logic didn't work. So during handling of the above exception, right, another exception is occurred. So it has multiple exceptions. That's fine. So let me take a pause at this time. Okay. So we'll try to make it in a good shape after some time. Well, I think this is good. Now let me take some 10 more discussion, sorry, 10 more minutes of discussion, which is outside of the coding scope. I know this is little frustrated coming into all the way this much of best practices. Now take a relax. And how many of you having a question now? Somehow, let's say my code is ready. I wrote the entire code to stop my servers. Code is working good. Now I don't want to execute the code manually. I want my code to be executed every Friday at 5 p.m. Weekends, no one is using my server. I wanted to stop it. Who will execute the code at Friday 5 p.m. guys? I don't want to come and execute the code myself, right? I want it to be automated, correct? How many of you having a question now? How that can be done? Python won't do that. Python is just to make you guys to prepare a code, and if someone execute it, it will go and do the job. It can't schedule itself for, right, to run it on a specific time. To make this scheduled, run it whenever needed, the AWS is provided a service called Lambda. So I'll just introduce what is Lambda, then we'll be good for today. So let me remove this existing Lambda function, which is already there. Okay. So all what you need to do is go to a Python Lambda function, sorry, AWS Lambda function. Then you just create a function. Just click on create a function. Author from scratch. That means I wanted to write a code from scratch. Your function name. This is stop the EC2 server. Any name is fine. Which code that you are expecting it to execute. Specify your program, right, from the drop down. your code is written in Python or Ruby or Go, Java, whatever makes sense for your use case. All these are the different versions that are supported. Select the Python, that version that you have made a code. Scroll down and just click on the role, the IAM role you need to give in order to give the permission. That's fine. Let it be default for now. Click on create a function. This is just an introduction. We'll talk more tomorrow. So once you create a Python function, Lambda function like this, all what we need to do is just come to this code block and put your code. Let's say once you written the code, right? This is the code that I wanted to execute, right? Just put that code here. You keep the code here and save the code. Okay. Then the Lambda will take care of executing this code for you. When the code has to be executed, we need to tell the schedule, right? Hey Lambda, can you execute this code on so and so on time, correct? Because the code can be executed here or the code can be executed in your machine. Either way, it is going to connect it to your AWS server and your AWS and do the necessary action, right? If it is running in your local machine, you need to give the access key, secret access key. If it is running in Lambda, you need to give the IAM role. Sometime back there was an option, right, to give the IAM role. Just to give the EC2 permission to the IAM role, it will be taken care of. Well, once you give the code here, then go little above and you see the add trigger. This is where you need to tell that when the code has to be executed. That's it. Just to repeat, create a Lambda function and you give the code here, whichever the code that you wanted to execute. When the code has to be executed, go to trigger and tell that, hey, the code to be executed at a specific condition. What is the condition that you wanted to add as a trigger? There are multiple triggers here. Out of all these triggers, for now, I wanted to use the trigger called event bridge. Don't worry about all these. Event bridge is one of the trigger. Inside the event bridge, you see that I wanted to create a rule and specify your rule name. My rule is rule 1 and the rule type, you see that the schedule expression, and here you tell when you are expecting it to be executed. You just specify the schedule. The schedule should be in this format. There is a format here, too much of information, but this is how you need to prepare a format, which is actually a cron format. You can go and read this documentation to get more details how this format is working. For now, let's say 0th minute at the 17th hour, right? And every month on every Friday. I don't want Monday to Friday, it will be every Friday. So at every Friday at 5 p.m., right, I want this to be executed. That's how you need to compose your schedule, then add a rule. The rule is added, and if you click on that, you see the rule details. This is how you have given a rule. Based on this rule, it is going to execute your Python program at every Friday or whatever the schedule that you have given, right? On that schedule, the Python program will be get executed, right? Whichever the code that you return to this function. That's it. That's the introduction, but we'll do little more setup on this Lambda tomorrow as well, right? So in this case, whenever it is printing any lines, let's say when you are executing the code, the lines are printing on your console itself, right? Hey, this is what is happening, correct? You see, currently the tag is processing, instance is stopped, whatever. These lines will be printed in the CloudWatch logs by default. We'll talk more on tomorrow. It will print this logs in the CloudWatch logs. So if you wanted to know what is happening, you go to the CloudWatch and read the log file there. There it will be printing all the statements. Every print statement will be printing the information there. You need to check it out over there. So usually if you go to the monitor tab and you see the view CloudWatch logs, if you go there, you can see the print statements or your logging statements can see over there, because this is happening when you are not aware, when you are not there, right? So it's happening behind the screen. So the CloudWatch logs will show you all the log data. That's how the Lambda works. Interesting. Anyway, so that's the story for today, guys. We are right. I mean to say, as I see a question in the chat window, yes, the Lambda purpose is very simple. You give the code to the Lambda that you wanted to execute, then you specify the trigger when the code has to be executed. That's it. That is what is the Lambda. Right? Specify the trigger when your function has to be run. Then give the code, which code that you are expecting it to run. Then it will be doing based on your trigger condition. So that you don't need to be there and run the program by yourself, right? Lambda will run it for you based on the trigger condition that you have been specified. Yes, that is the only purpose of Lambda. We are done for today's session, guys, but I'm just going through the session like questionnaire, right? When you are writing or creating a Python function, sorry, we spend a lot of time on Python function, right? I'm keep on using the Python function terminology. When we are creating a Lambda function, here you can see the supported programming languages. You can give the code only if you see that compatibility in the list. Here I can't see the bash scripting, right? So I can't give the bash script to the Python, sorry, to the Lambda. No, it won't work. It will work only the one which you see in this drop down: Python, Java, Ruby, Node.js, right? Only these things. The other things it will not support. Obviously, when Lambda is one of the AWS service, how will you create a Lambda? As of now, I have shown you how to create it from UI, right? No, don't create it from UI. Create it from Terraform. Correct. So this Lambda function will be created from Terraform only, because as per our condition, we should not create anything from UI, right? Yes. Use the Terraform code, create a Lambda function and deploy it. I'll show you how to do that in a tomorrow lecture. Yes, including the Python code. You give the Python code to your Terraform only. Hey Terraform, create a Lambda, keep this code to a Lambda function. You do everything in Terraform level. Terraform will do it for you. I'll deploy that using Terraform in tomorrow lecture. That way, we will be complete in terms of Terraform and the Python use cases, right, at one good level. Well, team, if any questions, do let me know, or else we are good for today.